you're going to hear me say quite often that the revolution will be televised. I'm quite serious about that statement, and the fact that I'm here right now on what is internet television makes it quite obvious that I'm serious when I say that the revolution will be televised. Right here on the Exodus Media Network. Now, I can guarantee you that this is the real revolution. And everything else that you're going to hear is milk toast, watered down, because all of the other so-called pundits and pontificators aren't willing to say what I have no problem saying. Now, Trump was inaugurated back on the 20th, this past Monday, and a lot has transpired since then. We see the images on television of these illegals being deported. I'm quite happy about that. I'm quite happy about that. Trump said that the cartels would be designated as foreign terrorist organizations, and he even hinted at possibly going after them in Mexico. I'm happy about that. I'm quite happy about that. That's significant because of the brutal toll that drugs have taken and continue to take here on American soil in our neighborhoods and our communities. And everybody under the sound of my voice can testify to that fact, that we know not just one, not two, but numerous individuals, friends, and family that have died as a result of this influx and this incursion of drugs. In particular, if we look at the past 4 years under the Harris and Biden administration, I know many of you, me included, that have lost friends and family due to drugs, drug overdoses. And many of you will claim that you love or loved those individuals that you've lost over the past 4 years. Yet there's a disconnect, because over the past 4 years, the very people that many of you voted for, Biden Harris, they can be held responsible for those deaths because they opened the borders and allowed in an unprecedented amount of illegals, 21 million plus, an unprecedented amount of drugs and fentanyl. We saw over the past 4 years an unprecedented amount of human trafficking and sex trafficking and exploitation of minors within the sex industry. which is all a direct result of the open border. But unfortunately, because so many of you under the sound of my voice are so dyed in the wool for the left, for the Democrat Party, you will not hold them accountable. You then turned around and went back out and voted for them this past November. So you are allowing them to function criminally with impunity. And when you can't hold someone or some political party or some entity accountable because traditionally you and your family have always supported that particular political party, and simply because of the tradition of supporting that party, you are willing to allow them to get away with murder. You can't say that because you're the same people that are saying January the 6th was an insurrection incited by Trump. That's what you all are claiming. In spite of the fact that there is nothing that was documented or recorded that can show where Trump incited anything. As a matter of fact, we know, and I've shown it here on the Exodus Media Network, where Trump told those people to peacefully and patriotically march down to the Capitol. He was, if anything, attempting to incite peace. Those were the words that he spoke. But in spite of that, you all will run with the narrative that he incited an insurrection. And insurrections don't happen without guns being fired and bombs being exploded. But nonetheless, you all prefer to refer to that as an insurrection that was incited by the very individual that was careful when he chose his words and careful enough to say peacefully and patriotically march down to the Capitol and protest, allow your voices to be heard. Now, we know, on the other hand, that from May 28th, May the 28th, 2020 until October 2020, we had approximately 572 riots, or we'll call them insurrections, in the United States of America. 574 insurrections / riots from May the 28th, October until October 2020. So now, that was a result of George Floyd. Those 570 plus insurrection riots were a result of George Floyd's untimely death. And the reason why you won't hold those perpetrators accountable, as well as those inciters, the people that incited those 574 insurrection riots, you won't hold them accountable because we know, and we have video record of those individuals that were inciting those 570 plus insurrection riots. And those individuals would be Kamala Harris, Maxine Waters, and many other Democrat Party politicians. And you won't hold them accountable because you believe that those people that were out there for months rioting and burning and murdering and destroying property and assaulting police, you believe that they were justified simply because George Floyd committed suicide. Now, I know some of you may have fallen over when I said that, but I know that it does not take 9 minutes and 29 seconds to strangle a man. Yet that image of that knee on the neck convinced the vast majority of you all that George Floyd was murdered. But it doesn't take 9 minutes and 29 seconds to strangle a man. It just doesn't. You see, George Floyd died from a cocktail of drugs that he voluntarily consumed. That's the truth, and that is the reality of the situation. But the problem is that does not fit your narrative. And if that is true, which that is true, that completely unravels for you the justification that you believe you had to riot for months on end in our United States of America. Let me say this once again. There were 35 people that were killed as a direct result of your 570 plus George Floyd insurrection riots. We sustained over $2 billion in property damage. And as I said before, 1,500 police were injured. You see, it's time we stop struggling with the facts and accept the facts and move forward accordingly. This whole, I'm going to move away from that George Floyd thing for a moment. We're going to talk about Marion Buddy. Marion Buddy. That is the so-called Episcopalian bishop. And I say so-called because a woman cannot be a bishop, a preacher, or a pastor, period, end of story. Yet many of you all will ignore that fact, ignore that the fact that the scripture makes that quite clear, and you will be angry at me for saying what God has made obvious. And you will refer to me as a misogynist because I stated what is true according to Genesis through Revelations, and that is Marion Buddy is not a preacher, a pastor, or a bishop because according to the word of God, she cannot be that because she is a female. Now, that means that Marion Buddy was out of place from the beginning. She should have never been standing before that congregation, professing to be a bishop. So she was completely out of place from the get-go. Consequential information, facts. Ignore them. You're free to ignore them. But the truth remains the same. Now, she unfortunately oversees 86 churches and 38,000 members. And she too has gone on record fraudulently claiming that Trump incited an insurrection on January the 6th. Marion Buddy is a fraud. She's a fraud for pretending to be a bishop, knowing that she is out of place, biblically out of place. She's a fraud because she is completely aware of the fact that Trump said, go down to the Capitol peacefully and patriotically, make your voices heard. He never incited anything. Marion Buddy is aware of that. She's a fraud. Marion Buddy then took shots at President Trump when she suggested that these illegal invaders, these illegal parasites, these illegal usurpers, and, the sodomite community was now fearful of Trump's presidency. Now, as it relates to the illegals, they should be fearful of being deported. And they should be deported because they came here illegally. And she claimed that they were not criminals, but the reality of it is when you cross our sovereign border illegally, you instantly become a criminal. So Marion Buddy, this fake bishop, Episcopalian fake bishop, took shots at Trump right there before the whole country. She thought that that was her big opportunity. And all she did was make a fool of herself. You see, Marion Buddy, like the Episcopalian Church, accepts sodomite activity within and beyond their church. Marion Buddy and the Episcopalian Church do not respect America's sovereignty. And this so-called Episcopalian Church and this so-called Episcopalian bishop are neither a bishop nor a church. I'm sorry, I take that back. She is a bishop. She's a Luciferian bishop. And the Episcopalians are a Luciferian church because they promote lawlessness and sodomite activity above and beyond Christ. So Marion Buddy is a bishop, but she's a Luciferian bishop. And she spoke on the behalf of the Luciferian Church, i.e., the so-called Episcopalian Church. It's time that we stop counting the Episcopalian Church as part of the body of Christ. They can't condone this sodomite activity, the appointing of sodomites into the position of bishop, and simultaneously, we count them amongst the ranks of the body of Christ. That's not true. They aren't. The Episcopalian Church is not a Christian church. And that's just the truth. And Marion Buddy is not a true bishop. Marion Buddy looked at Donald Trump and she said, "Have mercy on the people who are scared now." And I already told you what she meant when she made that statement in reference to the illegals, because they are scared of deportation, but they should be immediately deported. And as it relates to the sodomite community, she is claiming that they are scared because of the sodomite children that are now concerned that they won't be able to have their genitals mutilated, i.e., get a sex change. And furthermore, Trump has rejected the preferential treatment that these sodomites are seeking out, are seeking out in general. And Trump is doing the right thing when he refuses to condone the genital mutilation, i.e., sex changes for children. Trump did not agree with the Harris and Biden administration when they decided to give those individuals in prison sex changes at the expense of the taxpayer. And so, because of these things, she is claiming that the sodomite community is scared. That's not our problem. People that are supposedly of my ilk will not say these things, and they certainly will not say what I'm about to say. We have all of this social disruption over sex and gender simply because a small, minute group of individuals that identify themselves as LGBTQ, they're sodomites, simply because those people are up in arms because, let's say it like it is, we refuse to give them preferential treatment and to acknowledge what they claim to be a legitimate cause simply because of sodomite butt sex. You all aren't ready for the truth. This whole disruption, this whole uproar coming from the sodomite community, the so-called LGBT community, is really just over butt sex. The thing that brings them together as a community, the thing that defines them as a community is butt sex. And you people have been hoodwinked because you all are expressing this compassion for their eagerness to have butt sex, to openly have butt sex, and to attempt to indoctrinate our kids with the idea of having butt sex. Listen, Marion Buddy spoke with the devil's tongue when she was advocating for sodomite sex, genital mutilation, and illegal lawbreakers. And before I move on, I'm going to make it quite clear that you understand that Marion Buddy is a Luciferian bitch. Now, I'm sure that came off as derogatory to many of you, but let me make myself clear. A bitch is a person that is completely subservient to another. I repeat, a bitch is a person that is completely subservient to another. Marion Buddy is completely subservient to Lucifer. Therefore, I'm correct when I properly identify her as a Luciferian bitch. I know. Alan, you can't say that. Alan, that's too harsh. The truth is harsh, and too often people will argue that you cannot speak the truth, and I do not subscribe to that, ladies and gentlemen. I do not subscribe to that. So I'm going to move on from Marion Buddy because she brought this attention to herself. She wanted to be an attention whore, and she wanted to bring this attention to herself. So her wish has come true. Trump has very expeditiously and rightfully so has eliminated this whole DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Ladies and gentlemen, let me explain something to you. The fact that Trump has eliminated DEI does not make him a racist. As a matter of fact, eliminating DEI is one of the first things that I would have done. Because I, unlike many of you, in particular many of you on the left, many of you that identify as Democrat, many of you that vote Democrat, etc., you are under the impression, because you've been indoctrinated, you've been lied to, you've been hoodwinked, so you're under the impression that DEI is legitimate. But DEI is an erroneous extension of the erroneous original civil rights movement. Follow me. DEI is an erroneous construct of the erroneous civil rights movement. Now, when I say that the civil rights movement was illegitimate and erroneous, I am speaking very specifically, and I know Martin Luther King Day just passed. I am speaking very specifically about the so-called civil rights movement that was headed up by Martin Luther King and others. Now, you had people you had many people that were advocates for civil rights during that time that were legitimate and that were legitimately seeking civil rights, and they were justified in seeking civil rights. But Martin Luther King, he doesn't fit into that category, and many others. Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, and there's Bayard Rustin, and a long list of other individuals. They were illegitimate. They were illegitimate, and if they ever release all of the information on the civil rights movement and MLK, you'll find out for yourselves. But I already know the truth. I already know the details. I already know that Martin Luther King and many others of his ilk sold the movement out to the Marxists and to the sodomites. I just mentioned Bayard Rustin. He was a sodomite. He was Martin Luther King's mentor. That's why if you look at pictures of the civil rights, of pictures that stem from that civil rights movement, you will often see several, including Bayard Rustin, you will often see several sodomites prominently featured, because these people were inserted by liberal activists and by Marxist activists that had infiltrated the so-called civil rights movement. And that is the civil rights movement that I refer to as being erroneous. Those individuals that were so-called leaders of that movement, yet they have been compromised by the Marxists, by these radical leftist liberals, and by the sodomites, because these so-called leaders thought that they were saving the movement by conforming to these individuals and their wishes. And I explained in a previous episode that the movement had to be funded, and these people sold out the movement for funding, and they agreed to sign off on the sodomites, the Marxists, and these radical leftist liberals. And so the so-called civil rights movement became a lie. And that's the reason why you see sodomites, the LGBTQs, and these leftists and these Marxists being so prominently featured in the so-called civil rights movement today. But they were allowed in during the 60s by King and many others. Thurgood Marshall, he signed off on it, and many, many others. You didn't know this. Now, DEI is a white, liberal, Democrat Party, globalist, Luciferian tool. I repeat, DEI is a white, liberal, Democrat Party, globalist, Luciferian tool. DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, that construct was not created to benefit blacks. It was created to manipulate blacks so that the sodomites and the Marxists and the Democrat Party could benefit from black involvement. You see, they understand that the whole concept of diversity, equity, and inclusion would resonate with the black psyche. And they prepared the black psyche to be accepting of this whole construct called DEI. And they presented DEI to the black psyche as something that was altruistic and beneficial and specially made for them. Not knowing, black people had no idea that this whole DEI was just another way of emotionally stimulating them in the same manner that Ivan Pavlov's bell would stimulate a dog to come and eat. You see, they designed this thing to stimulate us as if we were just dogs. And it's easy to stimulate us because they just cry racism on our behalf and we're stimulated. That's the reason why you saw 570 plus riots as a result of George Floyd. But did it ever dawn on you all that George Floyd's death happened in a liberal Democrat state and in a liberal Democrat city? And somehow this whole thing got misconstrued and thrown in the lap of people on the right and blamed, and people on the right were blamed for this. How can you totally look over the fact that George Floyd's death took place in a liberal Democrat state and in a liberal Democrat city? You see, the left is very clever. They can take a death of a black male that happens under their watch in their city and in their state and somehow use that death to emotionally stimulate you all to get out here and riot for 6 months all over the country. And as a result of those George Floyd riots, we had 35 deaths, $2 billion in property damage, and 1,500 police were injured. How can you continue to be so gullible? If you look around the United States of America, and many of you black folk love to talk about police brutality. Now, on average, we have about 250 black people, 230 to 250 black people that die each year on average during a police-involved interaction. But 99.99% of the time, each and every one of those are justified. But where is this happening? This is happening in urban core America, and urban core America is ran by Democrats. Why will you not hold Democrats accountable for what you claim is wrong when we can absolutely establish that they are responsible for all of this? The black community rants and raves about underperforming and failing schools. Where do they exist? In urban core Black America, which has been ran for 70 to 100 years by Democrat politicians, Democrat Party Board of Elections, Board of Educations, etc. It's convenient for you all to continue to ignore these facts, but that only establishes the fact that you all will never, ever get around these issues if you will not acknowledge who is responsible for them, and if you want to continue to allow them to function with impunity as they destroy your lives and your communities. I've talked ad nauseum about the fact that Democrats have continually tried to destroy school choice and school vouchers. We had the case here in Ohio where Democrats went after school vouchers. And we know that school vouchers and school choice is the most expeditious way for black kids, in particular poor urban black kids, to be educated and to move from one class to the next. Yet you all allow them to get away with this. And you walk right back out the first Tuesday in November and you vote for these people who are continually trying to destroy your communities. And they are being quite successful at it. Many of you went back out and you voted for them this past November after they dropped 21 million illegals into your communities to compete with you for limited resources. You went right back out and you voted for them. You see, that's called stupid. But I'm going to give you a little history on how stupid black people are electorally. In 1936, 71% of black people voted Democrat. Now, mind you, in 1936, the Klan, which was created by the Democrat Party, was very active at lynching black people. Now, mind you, in 1936, the Klan, which was responsible for Jim Crow and black codes, was very active at implementing these things in 1936. In 1936, Democrats refused to allow you to vote. 1936 is approximately 80 years removed from slavery. And who was responsible for slavery? The Democrat Party. Who fought a war called the Civil War to keep slavery and white supremacy in place? The Democrat Party. They were the South. They were the Confederacy. Yet, just 80 years later, 71% of you were voting for this party. You're not very intelligent. You're not very smart. And we see that today you continue to be just as stupid. 1956 is the only year in America that 39% of Black people voted Republican. That's the largest number we've ever seen as it relates to Blacks voting Republican. That was 1956, Dwight D. Eisenhower. Since then, it has gone downhill. You people continue to identify with your master. You people continue to identify with those people that have been leveraging you so that they could benefit. Democrats have not done nothing but leverage you. They first leveraged you in the form of slavery, free labor. And now they are leveraging you and have been leveraging you for years electorally so that they could be in power. Listen, back to DEI. DEI, aka woke agenda, is a white liberal agenda. DEI is a sodomite agenda. DEI is not a Black agenda. Yet DEI is presented to you as a Black agenda. Out of DEI came the term people of color. That term was created, and that was a clever thing by these Democrats, to create this term people of color so that you all would embrace and accept people of color that were non-Black, because those are the people that they have been and continue to use in order to replace you. That's called the Great Replacement. And what they are replacing is your Black electoral power, because the more they bring them in, the more significant you become electorally, the less your vote matters. And they no longer have to consider you as a voting bloc. This is simple stuff. You only need to listen and follow along in order to be released from these shackles. That term people of color, they use that to prepare you for the 21 million people that they have allowed into your communities. The 21 million illegals, the 21 million non-Negroid illegals, who they have been planning and aiming to replace you with for years, because they are tired of relying on the Black community electorally. Because you Blacks, and I've said it before, for these white liberals, you come with too heavy of a price. They have to satisfy you every election period. They have to promise you things. They have to be concerned with satisfying you in order to get you out to vote. Now, these illegals, they're not going to have that problem with them. These people that they have allowed in, because those people feel as though they owe the Democrat Party something for allowing them in. So listen, this is quite simple. And I get it. They want to shift from dealing with a block of people that they feel that they owe to a block of people that now feels that they owe them. what I'm saying is this. White liberals, the Democrat Party feels as though they owe the black community something. And they do not like that relationship. They want to dissolve that relationship and shift over to a group of people, these illegals, these people of color, non-black people of color, that they don't feel as though they owe them anything because they've already given them free admittance into our country. And now in reality, those people being admitted to our country by these Democrats now feel as though they owe the Democrats something. That's a much better working relationship for the Democrats, and that's why they're replacing you Negroes with these people. It's quite clever, and they're using you in your gullible state of mind to help them replace you by identifying these people as people of color because they know that you will subscribe to that whole concept, people of color. Because what you hear in your black psyche is when you hear people of color, you, in your mind, see that as them being one of you, and they're not. Because remember, we're talking about non-Negroid people of color. But that's just another trick that you've fallen for. You continue to fall for these tricks coming from the Democrat left. As I mentioned earlier, Trump has began his great deportation. Thank God that he has began his great deportation. Trump is removing these criminal parasitic usurpers that have illegally crossed over our borders and have immediately began to exploit our citizenry and our resources, etc. And it's time that we send them back to their indigenous countries, and what they should be preoccupied with in their minds is going back home and helping to make their indigenous countries be great again, to be a better place than what it was prior to them leaving. You see, what we are inheriting as these people run over the border is we are inheriting a coward class of individuals because they're running, they're fleeing. Instead of staying and fighting for their country, they are fleeing to our country, and they are bringing their inferior cultures, their inferior thought processes, their inferior ways, and that will only contribute to our American decline. And President Trump understands that he can't make America great again if we are steadily importing individuals from countries that are not great and have never been great. You can't import a problem. You can't import a problem when you're trying to fix the problem. That makes no sense. That makes absolutely zero sense. And I refuse to remain silent. I refuse to withhold the truth from you. I absolutely refuse to do that. And additionally, let me touch on this. We have to stop the F1 visas, the M1 visas, all of these visas. Unfortunately, even some of the politicians on my side of the ledger, the Republican side, the conservative side, seem to be under the impression that we need these people. You cannot tell me that a country of 350 million individuals with the most prestigious universities in the world cannot adequately supply our country with the minds that we need to supply with in order to continue to move forward and stay far and above advanced as it relates to the rest of the world. You can't tell me that. You can't tell me that. And we can't continue to send our children to school for years and years and years, only to have them graduate and find out that these positions have already been given to non-Americans from India and China and a few other places. In particular, when you consider that India and China are actively seeking to undermine the American economy and the American dollar. That makes not a damn bit of sense. That makes not a damn bit of sense. We have to stop legal immigration. I'm sorry, we have to stop legals from coming here, because when you come illegally, it's not immigration. It's just an illegal invasion. So I'm a strong advocate for stopping legals from coming. I'm not for immigration. I'm not for people immigrating to America, in particular when you consider that we allow 1.2 to 1.5 million people to come here legally every year. We cannot allow that, because these people are coming from inferior cultures with inferior minds, inferior thought processes, inferior ways, etc., and they are not helping our country to be great again. And furthermore, and last but not least, these people are unpatriotic. These people continue to have an allegiance to their country. They're just coming here to take advantage of our resources and to exploit us. And I refuse to accept that. I refuse to accept that, and I hope that all of you will refuse to accept that. Now, I'm going to say this real quick before I move on to something as it relates to this erroneous environmental crisis. We were told that by the Democrats that this past election was a battle for America's soul, and I've mentioned this, and they were absolutely right. Satan is battling for America's soul, and the Democrat Party, i.e., the Luciferian Party, is certainly battling on the behalf of Satan for the soul of America. And you cannot dispute that. You cannot refute that, because it is the Democrat Party that is battling for sodomite activity, abortion, the murdering of innocent and defenseless babies. And I can go down a list of ungodly things that the Democrat Party is advocating for. Therefore, they are advocating, yes, certainly for the soul of America, but on the behalf of Lucifer. And that's why I identify them as the Luciferian Party. Ladies and gentlemen, there's no environmental crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, I repeat, there's no environmental crisis. But you've been misled to believe that there is an environmental crisis. And the first thing they will do is they will attack coal. I have my hat here. Coal equals jobs. Coal is very important to America being the most powerful country on the planet. And without coal, we would have never become the most powerful country on the planet. And we must continue to utilize our coal resources if we want to continue to be the most powerful and prosperous country on the planet. And if we abandon coal, then we will abandon our position globally as the most powerful country on the planet. Not to mention the jobs that would be lost and the families that will be destroyed as a result of that. Coal is burned clean. We have clean coal technology. That simply means that we have reduced the ash, the sulfur, the mercury, and all of those things that can help to contaminate the atmosphere. But let me make this clear. Even if we didn't have clean coal technology, I would still be a huge advocate for using coal because God gave this earth the ability to take care of itself in spite of what man does. If you don't think that God took into account modernity and the fact that man would eventually discover these fossil resources that he could then utilize to provide him with the energy necessary to live the lifestyle that he is living, then you don't have very much faith in God. God was very much aware that man would eventually discover and utilize coal. God was very much aware that man would eventually discover and utilize oil. God was completely aware of the fact that man would discover and utilize natural gas. And God, in all his omnipotence, understood that, and therefore, he made sure that in spite of our fossil fuel usage, the earth would remain intact. And he created a system to keep the earth intact. And that system that he created is called weather. And what I'm saying is this: the wind, the rain, the lightning, the tornadoes, the snow, the dew, the heat, the hurricanes, the sunshine, the CO2, the storms are mechanisms that God created and put in place for the earth to manage man's actions as it relates to his fossil fuel usage. Ladies and gentlemen, they try to make carbon dioxide out to be this culprit. They try to make carbon dioxide out to be this bad thing, but carbon dioxide is an essential thing, and it is essential for life on Earth because it is the primary ingredient in photosynthesis. Carbon dioxide creates oxygen, and carbon dioxide is necessary for life on Earth. And without carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases, the Earth would be in an ice age. And under those conditions, we could not grow the things necessary to sustain life. So we have to stop subscribing to this lie about CO2 and the earth needing to be saved from man and his fossil fuel usage. Listen, this whole environmental crisis lie in reality has nothing to do with the environment. It is something that was discovered by the Luciferian left, and they realized that they could come out and tell that lie, and if they repeated that lie, people would begin to embrace that lie. And as a result, they could bring about the social change that they desired to bring about as a result of this lie called environmental crisis. What I'm saying is this: when the left talks about an environmental crisis, they immediately talk about changing our behavior, our social behavior. They want to restrict our movement. They want to restrict our flights. They want to restrict what we eat and how much we eat. They want to even restrict human growth so that they believe we'll have less of an impact on the environment if we do not grow to our normal human size. So they have created technology to stunt human growth so that, according to them, humans will then have less of an impact on the environment. This is insanity. They've created this whole concept, and they are implementing this whole concept of 15-minute cities to where they make sure that everything is within a 15-minute walk of everybody, and they want to restrict your movement and keep you confined to your little mouse cage, if you will. Many of our universities are now allowing these kids to be indoctrinated, i.e., major in something called urban planning. Urban planning is how they, the left, are training these kids to eventually take away your freedom of movement, your desire to travel, and to cause you to become a lab rat in their urban core cage. And I'm not willing to participate in that experiment. I am not willing to participate in that experiment. And they're doing all of this under the guise of saving the environment. All of this social change, all of this social movement is under the guise of saving the environment. Because what this is truly about is these people usurping your personal liberty and your personal freedoms and restricting your movement. That's the reason why urban planning is all about planning 15-minute cities. We have the Paris Climate Accord. Trump has once again taken us out of this, because if we had continued to be involved with that, and if we had this and adhere to that, it would have greatly restricted your freedom as an American. One of the many things that restricts your movement as a free individual, and this is embodied in the Paris Climate Accord, is you are now restricted. You would have now been restricted to 1 or 2 flights per year. This is what was eventually coming down the pipe. And I just don't see how Americans would stand for that. Environmental social governance is also a part of this environmental crisis thing and this social change that they want to bring about. And it says environmental social governance. They mesh those two things together. They tell you right there that the whole environmental thing is to impact how you function socially. And they want to govern that, hence the term governance. If you all have paid attention, you see the zip cars. I've mentioned this before. These zip cars are communal cars. Part of this whole ESG, environmental crisis, environmental social governance, World Economic Forum bullshit that they are wanting to drop on us is communal cars, because they want to restrict and limit the number of cars on the road, and they figure 2 ways to do that. Let's force the whole idea of electric cars onto them and make them very much unaffordable and impractical, while simultaneously restricting them to sharing a car or cars, i.e. these communal cars. This is very dystopian and this is very slick, but they're doing this right in front of your faces, and you are falling for it, many of you, unfortunately. Many of you, unfortunately, are falling for this. Well, I appreciate whoever eventually tunes into this. I hope that this will have an impact. I hope that this will be rapidly and widely disseminated because, as I said before, the revolution will be televised. The revolution is being televised. And this is the home of the revolution because here I'm going to give you consequential information. I'm going to say the things that others refuse to say. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to tell you the truth because it is necessary. If we are going to save America and make America great again, we have to be honest about what needs to be done, and we have to be honest about what needs to be eliminated and what needs to be identified as something that is not conducive to America being great again. And I'm going to make that call here in spite of the fact that I'm going to say things that others will not say. I'm going to be honest about things that others will not be honest about. And I'm not concerned with the pushback. I'm not concerned with the blowback. I'm not concerned with what people will say. I'm not concerned with what groups and entities will say. And I just find no way in me that I can be concerned with that. And I want to touch on something real quick before I move forward. And I would have never allowed this if I was the president of the United States. And unfortunately, Trump, obviously, he didn't know any better. But I would have never participated in this so-called church service, which was not a church service in the Judeo-Christian sense of a church service. Because number one, you had a female claiming to be a bishop. That's not possible. Then she was pro-sodomite. That shows that she was unequally yoked with America and our traditional Judeo-Christian values. In addition to that, it is my understanding that at this service, they had Muslims, they had Hindus, and others speaking. And they seem to be under the impression that all we have to do is to bring everybody in under one roof and kumbaya, everything is all good. Listen, we can't be a Judeo-Christian country, and that's what we are. Make no mistake about it. And think that we can bring in all these religions that are unequally yoked with Genesis through Revelations. We cannot bring in people to speak on the behalf of Islam. We cannot bring people in to speak on the behalf of Hinduism. We cannot bring people in to speak on the behalf of Buddhists. Those things are unequally yoked with Judeo-Christian America. Those things are not meant to coexist with us. And I'm just keeping it real because nobody else will. Thank you.